the writing.ie page on Facebook, and to those people watching after the event to YouTube. Welcome to this week's episode of Winning the Writing Game, from big idea to bestseller. I think this is our 10th week now, so by the end of this episode, the amount of content and tips and ideas, it's a phenomenal asset now. And from the feedback we've been getting, I know it's really inspiring budding writers and avid readers out there. So we've got a bit of a treat this week. We have, as ever, best-selling author Sam Blake, and this week we have Amit A.A. Dhand, who is probably one of the hardest working men in the publishing industry. He has a really interesting day job, which we may hear about. He's been a stand-up comedian, he's written for theatre, and he's writing for some other medium as well. But he has created an extraordinary series, and yeah, what I'm interested in is two crime writers getting together, talking about murder, plotting, and getting away with crime. So I'm going to be monitoring the comments, and it's over to Sam and Amit. And take it away, guys.
Lovely. I'm just jumping in because I can hear a sound going on in the background here. I'm going to bring Amit in now.
There's a lot of echo, yes.
There is. I think somebody's got... Hang on, wait a second. Hi, Amit. How are you? I think... Has somebody got an extra window open? Have we got Facebook and YouTube window open? Just jump in. I can hear a sound going on in the background here. Can you hear?
So out of your face.
Now, how's that? Has everybody closed all their windows? I think we're good now. That's great. Lovely. Thank you so much for the brilliant introduction, Simon.
Okay.
Well, I
can't hear.
Can you hear me, Amit?
I can't hear you guys.
Hang on. Can you hear me now? How's that? Any better? No? Oh, we were perfect a minute ago. This is always the way. Why is there always?
Right, let me jump out and jump back in.
Can you just, yeah. Maybe he will. Do you want to just take? Can you just take? He's done it. That's perfect. Grand. Yeah. There we go. I'm bringing Simon back in. The people outside can see me. Oh, here he goes. How's that, Amit? Is that better? Can you hear us this time?
Can't seem to hear you guys.
Okay. That was working perfectly a minute ago when we were testing it.
Just while we're waiting for that. Anyone who's currently with us and is on comments, can you, this is like one of those stupid questions, can you hear us talking? Obviously, if you can't, I'm not going to say you can.
But you might be able to hear Amit just because he can't hear us.
Yeah, it'd just be good to know on comments, are people having any problems with sound? Maybe
okay, there's a little bit of a lag, so we're just waiting for a second for somebody to come up and give us a sound support team.
Dave's saying yes, which means he can hear us, or there's a problem.
Okay. Do you want to just text Amit and see what's he done? I think he might have had another window open, and then when he closed it, something happened, because that's what that echo was. It was another Facebook page open, the same Facebook page, but with the lag.
Okay, I can hear you. I can hear Simon.
Can't hear him now.
Can you hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
No.
We can.
It was working a minute ago.
Can you hear us?
I'm gonna log out and come back in.
Okay.
Perfect. Try that again. No, we will get there, guys. This is the.
Sam, I was just thinking. I think why this is really interesting to me is I think, writers on their own are really interesting, but two writers talking together, there's that kind of secret code which, because writing is done in private, you're kind of, it's like a couple of sort of beasts eyeing each other up in the park and trying to kind of work out what makes you tick. And I think that's why it's interesting.
Oh, can't hear anything.
You still can't hear anything.
What's going on?
Okay.
Do you want to close? Can you just text Amit, Simon, and ask him to close out of Facebook and close out Be Live, and then we'll try again. Try and bring it back.
Okay, I'm going to have to.
Jump off, find your phone.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry.
Maybe put one of his covers up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys can hear me because I can't hear you.
We can hear you. Yeah, but you can't hear us.
Okay, but I need to hear you. I mean, I can.
I'm just going to put the first cover up there while we're waiting for Simon to come back. So bear with us, lads. We will get here in a few minutes.
Dear.
Don't worry. It was all working perfectly earlier when we were doing it, so we do know it works. Put the first cover up there while we're waiting for Simon to come back. So now that's Amit. I can hear Amit open up Facebook. Don't worry. It was all working perfectly earlier. Now we'll just give it a few more minutes.
Okay, I'm going to try and log out and come in via Google. Okay, but not via Facebook. Let me see if that works.
Okay, it might not let you, but give it a go. Yeah, sorry, bear with us a few minutes. Simon will be back in a second.
Yeah, this is it's weird that because it was
okay,
working.
I can hear now.
Fine before.
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Excellent. That's
So
magic.
That's good. We were only saying nice things. Don't worry.
Good. I'm going to boot you out, Simon.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
I'll come back in a bit.
Excellent. Oh, hang on a minute. I've lost Amit instead. God, he's gone. Oh no, there you are. There you are. You're back again. Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Grand. And it's cool. I can spot Simon in the background. So, oh, he's coming in and out. What's that? Oh, he's gone. Oh my goodness, we've got sound, but we've got no picture now. I'll keep talking, don't worry. I'm really looking forward to this. Actually, you know, this whole thing about trying to start a broadcast like this and getting the different bits and pieces working, it's actually just like trying to write a book. You know, when you've got the here we go, we'll bring you back again. I was just saying all this stopping and starting, it's a bit like trying to write a book, isn't it? It's just the start of the, you know.
Oh, the joy of technology, honestly.
I know, when you're trying to get in. Here we go. I'm going to get rid of the book cover. So we've got you. Can you hear me now? We've gone again. Yeah, it's a bit like starting to write a book. You know, when you have all the different ideas and you've got the blank page and you're trying maybe different points of view and different bits and pieces, and sometimes it can take a while to get things going. I'm just wondering if here we go. If this doesn't work, we might start the whole thing again. Let's just try again. I can hear you. I'm just counting Amit back in. Now, Amit, how are you?
Right, still can't
Can you hear me?
Can
you hear me this time?
Google. Let's have a
No.
look.
Does that work? Can you hear me? Everybody can see. What I was just going to say, what we can do is we might just start the whole thing again. So I will go on. Yeah, I'm going to bring you in here. There we go. Yeah, no, we won't. We'll get an echo because there's a lag.
Okay,
so,
maybe we should start because we were fine on the.
Right. Can you hear us?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Don't touch anything.
Not going to touch anything.
And we can see you. Don't touch anything. Nobody touch anything.
You can see me. Okay, good.
Yeah, we can see you. I
can't see myself, but let's not worry about that.
Don't worry. Doesn't matter.
Don't worry about that. You look great.
No, guys, can everybody see Amit? Just in the comments. There's a bit of a lag, Amit, between.
I can, and I'm kind of a member of the public, so I can see it. It all looks great.
Grand. I leave you in there. I don't really want to touch anything, just in case. I might leave you on screen, Simon, seeing as we've got this far, just in case me booting you off mucks everything up again. Amit, let's start at the beginning. Streets of Darkness was your first book, and you have created the most amazing character in Harry Virdee. So can you take us right back, bearing in mind that you are somebody who has a full-time job, you're a pharmacist, and I read that you were a stand-up comedian at some point too, so we need to get back to that. But bear in mind, you're a full-time job, you're fitting your writing around the edges, and you wanted to write a book. Take us right back to the beginning and to the development of that character. Tell us a little bit about you and your writing.
Well, I always enjoyed reading as a child, and we had I grew up behind the counter of a convenience store, and in that convenience store we had a video rental library. And what I used to do was, when my dad would go to play snooker on a Monday night, and my mum would go to bed early because she had to open the shop, and I would sneak downstairs and watch the Certificate 18 movies. And this was a very successful thing that I was doing for a while, until one evening I picked up a movie called Silence of the Lambs, and I had no concept about what was about to happen to me. And I watched the movie and quite quickly realized that this was something different. You know, the thrill element of it was exceptional. But I couldn't finish the movie. When towards the end, Buffalo Bill comes in, I turned off the movie and I ran into my mum's room and I woke her up and confessed what I'd done, because there's no way I was sleeping alone that night. And that takes something for a 12-year-old to do that. And she told my dad the next day, and he gave me gave me a bollocking and said, how long has this been going on? I said it was the first time it happened. And he said, books is what you need to do, not movies. And he took me to Bradford Central Library on Saturday, which is something we did every Saturday. And I wandered out of children's fiction into adult fiction. And I saw this book called Silence of the Lambs, and I thought, that's weird.
Ooh.
I've just not watched a movie called Silence of the Lambs. I had no idea it was the same thing. But when I started to read the blurb, it was the first time I realized that books transferred to screen. And I thought, well, I have to read this book. And I took it home. And whereas I didn't finish the movie, I did finish the book. And I couldn't believe that a book could scare me, thrill me, but I couldn't stop turning the page. Whereas with the movie, I just turned it off. But with the book, I had to keep reading. And I finished the book in about 2 days. And my love affair with crime fiction was born, because for me, the fact that a book could do that to me, and was a movie entertained me for 90 minutes, the book kept me going for 48, 72 hours. And that's it. I wanted to start writing. So I started writing there and then. I was 12 years old. All of my stories from then on were dark crime fiction. I think today my teachers probably would have called social services, because after the summer holidays, you would always get asked to write about your summer holiday, where you went. And we came from an impoverished background, so we never went on holiday anywhere. But I would write these stories about being in the forest and being kidnapped and having to fight my way back, or that there was some kind of murderer going on. And my teachers were like, Amit really needs to stop reading Stephen King and Thomas Harris, because he should be reading Stig in the Dump or Kes or something like that. But I was just hooked. So I started writing probably at the age of 12. Got distracted by pharmacy. I mean, and I love being a pharmacist. So it's something I wanted to do. It's not that I sacrificed writing for pharmacy for writing. But when I qualified as a pharmacist, I hadn't read a book for a long time, because you get caught up in the pharmacy world. But I remember I was at work and somebody gave me Tess Gerritsen's The Surgeon. I probably hadn't read a book for 3-4 years. And I went home Friday night, I read it, I started reading it. I finished it early hours of Sunday morning. And I just never forget it, because I went downstairs and checked whether my windows and doors were locked, because I was so afraid. And it makes no sense, because the serial killer in The Surgeon picks on vulnerable women, and I'm not a vulnerable woman. But she'd got inside my head, and I started writing. It was 2006, and I started writing Streets of Darkness. I just wanted to create a character that we hadn't seen before. And all of the books I'd read, the protagonist was white, and it was like James Bond, Jason Bourne. It was a very familiar, comfortable. It was comfortable as well, because that's all I'd ever read. And I thought, what does a brown hero look like? And I was very aware that a brown hero had never made it to crime fiction before, certainly not in a series. And I started writing Harry Virdee there and then.
Wow, I mean, that is many pure gold moments there. Between you're sitting there and the counter, we've got this vivid picture, and then going into the library. I mean, that's amazing. I think people talk about being writers being born. I think that need for story and that hunger for story is something that you find once you discover it. It's like the Pandora's box opening, and that's what it sounds like. That you were destined for this. Never mind pharmacy, forget about that for a bit. But that absolutely destined for crime writing. And so when you started writing Streets of Darkness and you wanted to write your brown hero, what you've actually done is created a massively complex character. Did you plan him at the start? Tell us a little bit about, I mean, I can tell them about Harry, but I think you do a better job.
No, so at the start, because I failed with Harry for 10 consecutive years. I wrote him every year. I wrote 100,000 words every year for 10 years. So I wrote 1 million words unsuccessfully. And the problem was, and it took me, I think, 5 years to realize this, was I was writing Harry as a depressed, alcoholic, workaholic detective who was always in the pub.
Bit of a cliche there.
Yeah, totally, because all of the books I'd read, I basically thought I could do Harry the same way and just, paint him brown, and it would work. And what the problem with that was, it wasn't authentic. There was no authenticity to the character, because I was simply copying well-known tropes. And I just thought that if I made him brown, that would work. But because there was no heart, no emotion, no feeling, no three-dimensional authenticity, he was a cardboard caricature. And I tried really hard to keep going with him written that way. And after 5 consecutive defeats, because I'd signed with an agency in 2008, quite a big agency, and they kept telling me to do it again, and I kept doing it again. And after 5 years, I stopped writing him and I did something else. And only when I'd moved away from Harry, and I think it's probably important for people at writing, is if you spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years writing the same book, it does start to feel wooden.
Yeah.
And only when I moved away from him, left him alone, didn't think about him, and wrote a brand new book, but that worked. I mean, it was difficult for me because I had to leave my first agency and join a new agency, and that's brave for somebody who's unpublished, because getting an agent is one of the sort of gold standards of trying to be published. So for me to move away from a very well-known, reputable agency to a new agency, but I thought that, if you're not going to back yourself, then why are you in this game? And I felt that I had a product which was worth investing in. So once the new book had been written, and that was, I remember with my new agency, I mean, it's Simon who's on with it. I remember giving him this new book that I'd written, and he signed me immediately with it. And he was preparing to send it out to the wider world, to publishers. Now, because he was going to put me in the game, and I'd failed for such a long time, the fact that he was going to send me to publishers gave me the confidence to go back to Harry. Because all I wanted to be was in the game. I felt like I'd been on the substitutes bench at Manchester United for such a long time. And all I wanted to be was in the middle of the park. The referee blows the whistle and I get my 90 minutes. Because if I fail on my own back, that's fine. If a publisher says no to me, I can live with that. But for a publisher never to see the book, I couldn't live with that. Because Simon was going to send the new book out to the wider world. I don't know what happened. It was like a light bulb moment. I knew what I had to do with Harry, and I came back. I remember vividly, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I said, I'm going to write Harry Virdee. And she said, I'm going to give birth in 8 weeks' time. And I swear to God, if you do not finish this book, I will divorce you, because I cannot be ignored anymore. And so but I knew it. And I remember this vividly. Is I wrote Harry Virdee in 6 weeks. I took the book that had failed for 10 years. I rewrote him in 6 weeks obsessively. I sent it to Simon. And I remember the conversation, because he said, never before have I had a debut author send me 2 books, and I haven't even sent your first one out. Wow. And he read Streets of Darkness, and he said, forget the first book. This is the one that's going out. Where do you want to send it? And I said, I want to send it to Transworld. And again, I remember the conversation, because Simon said, well, they buy about 4 crime books a year. They're very difficult to crack. They've just done The Girl on the Train. Are you sure you want to go at the top of the tree? And I said, oh my God, I have failed for 10 consecutive years. I have got 67 rejections. Yeah. If they say no, that's nothing new to me. But let's be in the game. He sent it to them on a Friday, and they bought it on a Monday. And it was really as straightforward as that.
That just is pure gold again, because it's that thing. The 5 books that failed, or the 10, the years that you spent writing, that's learning the craft, isn't it? It's that, I mean, you might not have had the character quite right, but in order to learn how to plot and how to write and actually get to the end of a book, that's the 10,000 Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, I think, isn't it? So then coming back and seeing what needed to be brought to Harry was the gold, was just the magic. And actually, sometimes I think writing something very intensely like that, especially when you're under pressure from your wife, because that's quite a big pressure, is what really produces the stuff, because you just have to do it, and you just did it.
I think it's that, but I also think it's the fact that I wanted to take readers, and I knew that predominantly I was going to have a white readership, and I didn't want to write a cliched brown character, full of arranged marriages, or all the tropes that we associate with brown people. So for me, it was about writing a conventional crime thriller, but putting in those little elements of color that give it the Asian flavor, a bit of chili powder in it, So, the fact that Harry's been disowned by his parents, but he touches his mother's slippers, because, I've had a lot of white people say to me, how come Asian people always touch their mum's feet? Because it's a thing that people do. And my answer is always like, well, in an Asian household, the saying is that the world starts where your mother's feet end. It's a sign of respect. So I thought, well, how can I put that into the Harry Virdee books? And I knew, that Harry had been disowned by his mum for marrying a Muslim woman. So I just put the pair of slippers in his house, because when Harry gets disowned from his mum, she takes him to the back door and she says, your father's disowned you. I love you, but I need to do what your father says, because there's a lot of patriarchy in the Asian community. And she just takes her slippers off and she gives them to Harry, and that's her sign of her blessing to him. And she goes, you've touched my feet every day since you were born. You can't touch them anymore, but here's my slippers. And these slippers live in his house by the front door, and he touches them every morning, hoping he'll get back to her. Now, that single piece of emotion, which is the Asian, a view into emotion and a view into his world from an Asian perspective, is probably the thing that I get most comments on, because everybody wants to see Harry reunite with his mother. And that's what we drip through in all of the books until we get to a point where he doesn't need to touch the slippers anymore because his mum's in front of him. And I think what I do with the books is I put these little elements of Asian culture into a really conventional crime thriller. Cut it so that the pace is king. It's the one thing that I obsess about is pace, because I'm also aware, and I think this is probably important for anybody that's writing books at the moment, and this is a scientist in me as well, is as human beings, we need a constant dopamine hit. We are obsessed with iPhones, internet media, instant photos, instant messaging, instant gratification. We are now consumed with instant gratification. So for me, I need to know that when someone's reading my book, I am giving them a dopamine hit in the first chapter, the second chapter, the third chapter.
You are.
And I'm constantly pulling them into the next chapter. Yeah. So my chapters, and when I wrote Streets of Darkness, every chapter was 1,500 words, because that's 2 pages of a magazine article.
Yeah.
And I thought I can always read that in one sitting, but if I've got to turn the page and see how many pages the article is, sometimes I'll come back to it and I never come back to it.
That's genius. That's genius.
Then we realised
people are always asking me about the length of chapters and how long they
could
be.
Really, really important. And I realised a Girl Zero that human beings were getting even shorter with their attention spans. So I cut it from 1,500 to 1,250. And then City of Sinners, again, we'd moved on a year. Human beings are getting more impatient. I cut the chapters to 1,000 words. And One Way Out, all of the chapters are now 900 words.
They're really
so
short.
I'm trying to adapt
really fast
to what's going out there.
Yeah.
I know that if I don't give you a dopamine hit quickly and get you focused and in, then you're probably going to put the book down. And for me, I think you have to be aware of human psyche at the moment. And I know lots of people say, well, no, I want to write a book which is, 170,000 words, and it's an absolute epic tale. And that's amazing to be able to do that. But I think the issue arises that you want people to finish your book so that you'll get a following. And for me, I'm very aware of the scientific and the business side of writing, as well as the creative side of writing. And I think you have to be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, and it's wonderful to hear about the detail there that you've taken this character. And I mean, just for the people who haven't read him yet, I know we're dropping in the links to the books as we go. Normally I show the covers, but I'm just a bit worried about fiddling with anything in case we lose you again. I'll get them in now at the end. But the building on detail and the bringing those details through the character. Harry comes from a Sikh background. He marries a Muslim, so we've immediately got a massive conflict in there. He has a young son. When Streets of Darkness, in the same situation you were in, his wife's pregnant, so you've got that pressure in there as well. But he's further complex, even more complex than that, because his brother is involved on the other side of the law, shall we say. How did you make a decision to really? I mean, that's really literally like. Harry's nearly like a ticking time bomb in terms of a character, because of all these different things that could literally go off in his life, and they give you so much story potential before you've even brought a plot to him. So talk to me a little bit about his brother and how you made a decision to put him on the other side.
I was aware that family dynamics like that have been done before, but what I wanted to do was to conflict Harry. So he's our police officer, he's a detective. He believes in law and order, albeit in a very unique way, because Harry's not afraid to get his hands dirty. And for me, because I work as a pharmacist as well, and I spend a lot of time dealing with methadone and drugs, and I see the impact of that world on a large parts of the community. Now, for me, Ronnie Virdee is a really interesting character, because what he says to Harry is, we have never ever in the history of humanity won the war on drugs. There has always been drugs. There will always be drugs. So if we have never won, why don't you let me control the market, and at least who's controlling it? And synergistically, I won't cut the drugs with cement powder, and I won't cut the drugs in a way, because pure heroin is reasonably safe. So let me control the supply of drugs into Bradford, and you know who is running things. And and what he says to Harry is, if it's not me, it'll be somebody else, and that somebody else you don't know. Okay, and that somebody else will be lawless and do whatever he wants whenever he wants without having any view of you, Harry. And Harry's then put in this position where he knows that Ronnie's right, because if he removes Ronnie from power, there'll be somebody else who steps in. The king is dead, long live the king, okay? Because that's the way that drugs work. And you can go back to all the great movies, Godfather, Scarface, there's always a king, okay? There will never not be a king. So for me, it was really interesting to have the detective paired with the king, okay? And both are trying to drag each other to their side. So Ronnie is saying, why don't you join me and we can rule Bradford, okay? I paint Bradford as this Gotham-esque dark place, and Harry's my Dark Knight, which puts Ronnie as kind of that Joker type character, right? But the thing with the Joker is he's just obsessed with anarchy, okay? And I think there's always elements of that in all good crime stories. Is you want to have a bad guy that basically the lines are blurred. There's two circles and they interact with each other. So you've got good, bad, and then they're both like that. And it's really interesting because Harry's trying to drag Ronnie to his side of the fence, and Ronnie's trying to drag Harry to his side of the fence. And it just gives you so much playground to explore, okay? Because I want my audience to ask themselves the question at times, God, how is it that Ronnie Virdee makes sense? How is it that what he's saying is true? And Harry, you need to, it's the conflict, isn't it? Because you never want to be all good or all bad.
It's brilliant.
But also Ronnie is the only person that Harry has in his life, because Harry's been disowned by his mum and dad. Yeah. Ronnie is the only link that Harry has to his family, and he desperately wants to keep hold of it, okay? And Ronnie knows this. He knows that Harry can't disown him or arrest him because it will break his mother's heart, and she's already heartbroken. It would totally destroy his family in a way that Harry's already done. So the emotional side of it is Harry can't take him down, because then he will have destroyed absolutely everything, whereas he's got this small thread of hope that he's got Ronnie on his side. And I think that to have two characters like that are constantly clashing but love each other, at some point there can only be one. And what does that look like? And I don't know, because I haven't answered that question yet.
But that clash, that sort of the pulling apart and the magnetism is where the story is. I mean, a story in its own right, before, as I say, before you even bring any plots in. But in Girl Zero, Harry's niece is killed, isn't she? So that's a whole story then that then unrolls. I absolutely love the level of detail or the level you understand these characters, and I hope that's coming across to people. That when we talk about people developing character and writing character, I think to make a story really work and to make it jump off the page in the way that it does, because if you are writing a chapter that's only 900 words long, there are so many, it's like the iceberg, there are so many layers underneath the level of the sea that we need in order to make those 900 words work. And that's what's coming through as you're speaking. It's very much the level, the depth of understanding you have. It's nearly like they're in the next room and you know these people so well. And I think for new writers to understand that is crucial. I mean, when you started Streets of Darkness, did you just start writing when you in that 6 weeks when you were just like, when the idea fell into your head and Harry was there, did you think about all of these different conflicts, or did they just sort of appear in the character and he jumped off the page at you?
No, so I don't plot. So I'm a pantser. I mean, you had Sophie Hannah on a couple of weeks ago, and she is meticulous in planning, and I've done panels with Sophie where we talk about this. And she has a really interesting blueprint, and then she follows it, and the writing comes easily. For me, I have no idea what's going to happen. I simply start writing chapter 1, and off we go. And what happens is that, if your character, if you know your I always know my characters really well, and I always know the first chapter and I know the last chapter, so I know where I'm going. I always say it's like setting off to a destination somewhere. As long as you know where you're going, there's lots of different ways to get there. Okay.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And that's all you really need to know. And then I know my characters really well. They just talk to me and they write themselves almost. So for me, I always know the characters really well, and it's the most important thing, because they are what's going to carry your book forward. They're the one that's going to carry the readers in. And for me, I think the rest is down to imagination. I always say that scene setting should be, quite sparse, because if somebody walks into a room, do you need to know what colour the walls are, what colour the carpet is, how big it is, how small it is? And if someone's walked into a room, end of story, get on with the story, get on with what happens.
That's true. Can I just interrupt you there? But you managed to bring Bradford to life. So your scene setting, what you're using is very, very deft detail. And I think that's an experience that you've learned through writing the 100 million words beforehand. Because I've never been to Bradford, but when I'm reading one way, I can see the city. I can see the park, and I can see the club that he goes to, and I can see his parents' house so clearly. So what I think for anybody who is watching, it's worth them getting your books and just in each 900 word chapter, highlighting the bits where we're seeing the scene, because actually it's so deftly done. Like, you don't think you're doing it, but it's coming through.
Yeah, and again, that's me knowing that I've only got 900 words to play with, right? Or 1,000, 900 to 1,000 is. I want to set the scene, and I think to myself, I can do that in, I don't know, 10 to 15 lines maximum, right? Once the scene is set, again, I don't want to preach to the reader. I want them to use their own imagination. Yeah. So for something like let's say violence or something dark's going to happen, I'll go 70 and I'll make the reader go the final 30. So I never actually fully explicitly tell you what happens, because I don't. Yeah. If I do that, then I'm removing from the reader their own ability to scare themselves or to thrill themselves, because we all get thrilled or scared in different ways. Yeah. It's the same with scene setting. When scene setting is probably even worse, is I'll go 40 and make the reader go 60. Okay. Because from then I'm not preaching to the reader. I never want to preach to them. I want them to use their own imaginations, because that's the key. Is once the reader is using their imagination to bring my black and white words to life, I win. Okay. Yeah. Because absolutely. Now they're using their own imagination. And no matter how good a writer I am, I can never do that to 100,000 readers, because they'll all view it a different way. But if I can make them do it themselves, without even realizing they have brought my words to life, and that's when hopefully they will pick up book 2, book 3, book 4. But if you overly write everything, if you describe every room, every character, every color, every emotion, if you tell them everything, then you will never engage their own imagination to bring your words to life. And at that point, it becomes one-dimensional and mechanical, and they won't remember it, because they bringing my words to life means it's personal to them. Yeah. And I think that's really, really important. Bringing Bradford to life. I mean, I've been here my whole life. I know the city with my eyes closed. And I think that for me, when I'm reading a book I want to be taken into a world seldom explored and that I don't know about. And I think that people don't know a lot about Bradford. So it's my opportunity to layer the story with a sense of place. And that's really important. So, a sense of place, a sense of character, and a sense of story. Once you have those three things, start writing.
Absolutely. No, it's fantastic. And you get a sense of character. Bradford being like a character in the book too, which is brilliant. Now you're talking about being a pantster there and just writing. And I love the idea of the fact that you know where you're going and you've got the last chapter and the first chapter, because anything can happen in the middle, and it's lovely that you can be led by your characters. But you also write screenplay, don't you? I'm going to just try a quick fiddle here and see if I can get the No Ordinary Life poster up. And that's quite a different process. Cue your I've got to find it here, sorry. Okay, which is right, give me just 1 second to do a quick fiddle. But when you're writing screenplays, it's a different process. It's much more carefully plotted. How do you start that? Is that a completely different process, or do you start with that same understanding of character?
I start with the same understanding of character. I've started screenplays or theatre plays because I simply love story. For me, story is always king, and I wanted to learn about story. And for me, I thought, let's try doing screenplays. So I wrote a short, No Ordinary Life, which is on screen at the moment. And we filmed that in February this year, and that's a true story about me and my dad and the corner shop, and it's a story about communities judging each other and then coming together. I think the one thing that I'm really passionate about is the Harry Virdee books explore brown on brown racism, something that's never spoken about, because brown people can be racist. They love to talk about white on brown racism, but they never talk about brown on brown racism, and I think we have to explore that. So No Ordinary Life is my dad's story of opening up a corner shop in Bradford, being the only Asian people on the estate, and getting horrendous racism. But the one thing that my dad did was he never reacted to it. He just said, this is a war of attrition. I will make them love me, okay? Because they can't hate me long enough for me to turn their preconceptions on their heads, okay?
Yeah.
They'll hate me for a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, but eventually they will forget their preconceptions and they will just see me as Barrett. It's my dad's name. And I wanted to put that into No Ordinary Life because we've never seen that before. And I think that there are lots of narratives out there at the moment, which is the whole world is racist, everybody hates us. But, and genuinely, and I say this absolutely earnestly, I've never met a racist person that I couldn't turn. You know, in the pharmacy, I employed somebody who was a member of the BNP, believe it or not. And I didn't know that he was a member of the BNP because it's not the kind of question you ask in an interview.
No.
But he worked with me for 2 years, and at the end of it, you know, somebody really close to him passed away, and the first person he found was me.
Oh,
because we spent time with each other, we understood each other, and we absolutely smashed apart all of those preconceptions. And I learned that from my dad. So for me, No Ordinary Life is that story. It is when you put two people together, hate only lasts so long.
Yeah.
But friendship and love last a lot longer. The script itself, yeah, I mean, I don't have, you know, an MA in screenwriting. I don't have a posh qualification in book writing, but I read a lot. So I started reading scripts, and I read probably, on the BBC website, you can download every script that they've ever done. So I probably read 50 scripts. I highlighted them, I color coordinated them, I broke them down, how many scenes, how many characters, how many lines on the page, how many gaps. And I failed a lot. And that's what you do. You fail a lot, don't you? You write stuff that's terrible, and eventually you write something that wins. So for me, No Ordinary Life was a really important personal story about friendship and about community. And it's going to be released at the Bradford Literature Festival next year. We're supposed to be this year, but COVID put that to an end. And then off the back of that short, I started developing a new original series, a 6-part drama. And again, that's just because it's something that I really love doing. I love story, and I like to figure out how it all fits into books or scripts or theatre. Because if you love story, why wouldn't you try and explore that and just see what it looks like?
Absolutely. I love this. Is really taking you back to that 12-year-old boy behind the counter and discovering that the movie and the book are two sides of the same story. I think is absolutely fascinating. I mean, to me, screenwriting is a whole different world. And I think doing your research there and going in and reading those scripts and starting to understand how they work and why they work is the same thing that we do as book writers when we sit down and we read books and we try and work out what it is. You know, like you've understood the lengths of chapters and why, and you're using that technical knowledge, everything that you've learned, and feeding it in, which is producing a fantastic product. I'd be really excited now to see the TV, because if you're bringing the same attributes that you've discovered and you've brought to the Harry Virdee series onto TV, it'll be very, very exciting. I think we've got streams of comments, everybody saying how amazing and inspirational you are, because I think there's been some really, really fantastic bits in there. I'm going to Simon, do you want to bring in any of the questions? I can see you've been scribbling there, reading away.
Yeah, for a start, I think this is amazing. People just going, this is so brilliant, what a great speaker, this is so inspirational. But I think what people are picking up on is the notion of studying your craft, and I think that I think a lot of people are going to be studying your books this weekend. But there's one question which is an interesting one. Do your customers in the pharmacy know about your life as an author? I know the answer to that, but I'd like everybody else to hear it.
Yeah, I sell my books and I publicize them through the pharmacy. And yeah, when it's really interesting to me, because all of my regular customers that come in, and I have a really busy pharmacy, I've got lots of regular customers, is they'll see the picture on the wall of me, you know, my author photo, which is quite moody and quite sort of, you know, dark and mysterious. And there's this moment where they look at that photo and then they look at me, and then they look at the photo and they look at me, and you can see it kind of dawning on their heads. And I love watching it, because there's this realization, their face changes, and then they point to me like, or they'll come into my, or we suddenly, now we get, you know, sometimes I'll get a fan in, and they'll pull my staff to one side and be like, oh, you know, what's he like to work with? And they'll just be like, annoying, he's our boss, you know, because they just see me as a pharmacist. But the reception's been really good, and surprisingly is you know, I've got a really large fan base of sort of 70 and 80-year-old women, sort of my elderly patients, and I just never thought, because my books are, you know, they're dark and they're tense and they can be really edgy, and I just never thought that they would take to that, because I guess I had that preconception that they would want to read, you know, Little Women, or they would just want to read really quite tame
Catherine
books.
Cookson.
But
Yeah.
they are obsessive. Honestly, I think my biggest fan is a 90-year-old lady, and she phones like every few weeks, and she's like, when's the next one out? When's the next one out? So for my
Wow.
patients, I think they're quite bemused by it, but they're really supportive. And when I have book launches in Bradford, they're always a
They're
really
huge, aren't
big
they?
sort of, they're big bombastic affairs. And it's always difficult for me, because the customers will come in and be like, it's sold out. We know we're your patients. We must be able to get in, because, you know, you look after us. And it's like, I'm really sorry, you know, I can't fit you in. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And it can be quite amusing at times as well, because they sometimes can't quite figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the book launches. I remember, I think it's maybe the first one I came to. I was kind of wandering around Bradford, and I couldn't quite remember where the bookshop was. And then I turned a corner, and there was like this massive queue going around the corner, and I just thought, I wonder what that is. You know, I wandered along, and I thought, bloody hell, it's a book launch. And when you do a book launch there, I mean, it's like the city stops. I mean, there's 150 people queuing in the street. It's absolutely phenomenal. But I think it's a nice story. But I remember your mind was possibly wandering a little bit during one of the book launches, and you looked up to the ceiling, didn't you, at Waterstones in Bradford, and that kind of inspired an idea for a future book. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I did. We did the book launch for Girl Zero, and I was being interviewed on stage, and I remember, I don't know what happened. I looked up at the ceiling, and this is how stories start. I looked up at the ceiling, and I saw a dead body hanging from the ceiling. Okay, it's Waterstones in Bradford. It's the old Wool Exchange. It's a really sort of bohemian Gothic feel to it. It's the most magnificent bookstore you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And I looked up to the ceiling, and I don't know, it's probably 200 feet high, and there's a dead body hanging there, Asian girl hanging from the ceiling, and I thought, that's weird. So I finished the interview, signed all the books, did everything, and as I was walking out, I looked back to the ceiling, and she was still there. And she simply never stopped talking to me. And that's how City of Sinners was born, is because every day, every moment of every day since I saw that view, all she said to me was, Harry, how did I get here? Who put me here? I mean, how the hell do you get 200 feet up in the air at the Bradford Waterstones? You know, it feels impossible. But she didn't stop talking to me. And that's where City of Sinners was born, is I thought, right, let's get into this. And I had to figure out why she's there, who put her there. And for me, I knew I was going to write a serial killer book, but I didn't want to do the cliched serial killer. I thought to myself, actually, let me write a serial killer who says to Harry, and he says to him quite openly, you will absolutely catch me, because we always get caught. It's not a question of catching me. It's a question of how much damage can I do to this city before you catch me. And for me, that flips it on its head, because now it's not about can we catch the serial killer, because we know that Harry's going to catch him. And the serial killer knows this. But all he says is, every day you don't catch me, I will kill another person. So it's on you. If you're not good enough, people will die. And that puts huge, huge pressure on Harry Virdee, because it's personal. Because Harry almost blames himself. He's like, every day I don't catch this guy, he's going to kill somebody else. And the serial killer is really, really arrogant. He's really ballsy. He simply breaks every single rule that serial killers are supposed to do. He leaves evidence, because he's not bothered about being caught. It's about how long it's going to take him to get caught, and just how much anarchy can he create. For me, that all started with Bradford Waterstones looking up at the ceiling and seeing a dead body. And for me, that's how stories always start. You know, One Way Out, the new book, which is shortlisted for the Dagger Awards, is I thought to myself, there's 204 mosques in Bradford in a relatively small area, probably like 2 or 3 square mile radius. And I thought to myself, if I compromise one of them in an 18-hour window, so there's a bomb in a mosque in Bradford, there's 204, and the terrorists that do this say, one bomb, 204 mosques. If you don't hand over to us 4 toxic individuals, we will detonate the bomb. And for me, that question arose because I thought to myself, would the British government sacrifice 2, 3 people to save 1,000? You know, are all lives equal? And I guess it ties into the current world that we live in. You know, for me, if you've got 1,000 innocent Muslim people in a mosque, would the British government sacrifice? And I flipped it, so the terrorists are white supremacists. It's not the cliched, you know, we've got an Islamic terrorism going on. They're white supremacists. Let's flip it and see if we can answer that question. And that's how that book came about. I wanted to answer that question myself. I didn't know the answer to the question when I started writing the book. I knew it at the end of the book. There's always one small question that you have to answer, and it just turns into 85,000 words.
It's absolutely brilliant. That the opening to that book is absolutely sensational. I mean, it pulls you straight into the story, because you set up all those emotional premises. You've got Harry in the park with his mother and his young son. His wife's in the mosque. You've got bombs going off. You've got the terrorism. It's just an incredible start. I mean, it's incredibly cinematic, isn't it? I think you can see how you're bringing in the film side of your brain coming through as well as the writing side. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I wanted to have that. I don't know if anybody's seen Dark Knight Rises. There's that football game that goes, and they kick off this American football game, and then the bomb goes off, and the entire ground just sinks into the floor. This huge bomb blast. And so I remember I was sitting in City Park. There's water fountains there. You know, it's probably the most beautiful place in Bradford. It's the hottest day of the year, and it was the book launch for City of Sinners. I remember every book launch I've had the idea for the next.
You do. It seems to be a thing.
I was sitting in City Park. It was the hottest day of the year. The water fountain was full. Everyone's having a great time, and I was sitting there. I was sitting there having an ice cream, and I looked up to the sky, and visually I could see, you know, Apache helicopters flying over. I could see police cars coming to a screaming halt, armed police running out. Everybody's screaming to clear City Park where there's thousands of people. There's a cinema screen in City Park which plays a children's movie. And I looked at it and I thought, that's going to get hacked, and we're going to have a skull and crossbones, and it's going to be like, leave City Park immediately. And a countdown will begin. A countdown will begin from 20 minutes. And everything's going to go to hell. Everyone's going to run. Everyone's going to panic. And I just had this view in my head, and I sat there and I literally watched it play out. Everybody's running. Harry's got his mum with him. She's got a bad hip. She can't run, but he's got to save her. He's got his kid with him.
Everything's going on.
Everything's going on. Yeah. So for the opening chapter of One Way Out, I think those first 3 chapters, when, you know, you've got police helicopters, you've got the cinema screen being hacked, everyone's screaming and running. No one knows what's about to happen. And then at the end of the second chapter, the bomb goes off, and the entire City Park just floods into the ground. You know what I mean? And for me, cinematically and visually, I've just blown up the centre of Bradford, and we're in. Okay, and that's the first. So everything that I've just described is the first 2 chapters.
It's brilliant. Just to
dopamine
say,
hit again. It's the dopamine hit, isn't it? I want the readers to see it, feel it, and think, "Oh my god!"
And you've just explained that, but you managed to pack that into 2 chapters of 900 words. That is the real skill, because it's you get all of those things. You get all the emotion. You get the heat. That's the other thing. It's just a big factor in that whole picture, because you get this sense of claustrophobia and the ash afterwards, and you've got that sort of 9/11 feeling and the chaos and the confusion that we're all familiar with. And you've managed to communicate that in such a short period of time that absolutely is a dopamine hit. The hairs stand up on the back of your neck even when you're saying it. So it's just, it's perfect reading. It's like the perfect.
I think for me, it was also the family dynamic as well. It's because Harry's dad hates the fact that he's married a Muslim woman, and he's never met his grandchild. So for me, yes, we've got the bombastic story beats of the bomb going off and the helicopters and all of that sensational stuff. But then I've also got, you know, an 85-year-old old man in his house, and he's never met his grandchild. And his wife walks in, because Harry's wife is in the mosque, so she can't look after the kid. Harry needs to find out who's blowing up Bradford, and, you know, he needs to save his wife. He can't have the kid. The only person that can have the boy is the grandparent. So she walks into her house with this child, and the granddad is really racist. You know, he hates everything that Harry's done. He hates Muslim people. He hates everything about it. And she puts this child, this 5-year-old child, in front of him and says, "Show him your hate." And for me, having an 85-year-old man, because, you know, and again, it's a story that I wanted to talk, that talks to everybody, is because we've all got, you know, grandparents, you know, that story of grandparents falling out with their children and grandchildren, but wanting to see their grandchildren is, I wanted to see how an 85-year-old man would deal with having a beautiful little 5-year-old boy in front of him and seeing if he could hate him. And I think that half of the story, breaking down Harry's father and really breaking him down, leaving nothing uncovered, to say, can you hate this 5-year-old boy? And that journey, that emotional journey, I think carries the other side of the story, so that you've got the sensationalist, armed police, terrorists, and all that stuff, but then you've just got a family story where you've got a grandparents and a little boy in a house, and the grandmother loves him, she loves the boy, and she wants to protect him, and the granddad wants to hate the boy, but can he? Because can we as human beings, no matter how racist we are, look at a little 5-year-old and apply the same level of malevolence? I wanted to ask that question.
Exactly, and especially a 5-year-old that looks just like his own son too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I just leap in with a couple more questions? So Will is talking about how you manage time, because obviously you're setting yourself a big challenge, aren't you? You particularly in One Way Out, you're trying to get through 20 minutes in a very short number of words. Do you have a process to manage that, or do you just go with your instinct?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll do is those 900-word chapters in the start will be 2,000 words.
Right.
Okay. So I will just write them to get everything that I want to get in there. So it's not the fact that what you are reading is what I wrote in the first draft. The first draft will be a swollen, heavy book. So the 900-word in One Way Out, those first 3 chapters were probably 6,000 words. And then I look at it and I say to myself, where are the beats of the story? Okay, what do we actually need to know? So I remember vividly in the first chapter of One Way Out, Harry talks a lot about the Bradford Literature Festival, because that's what's happening at the time. He talks about taking Aaron into the bookshop to buy a book. We talked about the Gruffalo. There's quite a lot of story in there that was really nice. I wanted to really take the readers into that world. But then when you're looking at the editing process, I'm like, is that giving us forward momentum? Because all I know is at the end of that chapter, Harry looks at a cinema screen, he looks at the police officers, he looks at the Apache helicopters, and I knew that the last line of that chapter was going to be Harry looking at his mum and saying the word run. Okay, that's where I need to get to. Okay, that's the absolute gold standard, is looking at his mum and saying run. So therefore, does him taking his son into the bookshop to buy a book add anything? No, it doesn't. It's lovely, but it doesn't add anything. Does Harry, changing his kid's clothes because he's jumped into the swimming pool, does that add any forward momentum? No. So you strip out anything that is not adding forward momentum to get to that line, and it's that line that will drive everything. Run. Once you start stripping out the really obvious things, then you're probably left with about 1,400 words. And then it does become difficult, because then you have to kill your darlings, as Stephen King says. Is you have to really ask yourself, well, this is not giving you forward momentum. And then, I probably sent, 1,200 words to my editor. And that's when the editors come in, because they see the things that you can't. And then it's super, super tight. So I think in the first instance, it's not the fact that I know there's going to be 900 words. It's 2,000 to start with. Just write everything that you can see and that's going on. And then you strip it out. As long as you know what the final word of that chapter is. I knew that in the prologue, which is really short, I think the prologue's probably about 350 words. I knew the last line was going to be Bradford was under siege. Okay. Yeah. I knew that the last line in chapter 1 was going to be Harry saying run. Okay. Once you know where you're going, it's like a map, isn't it? You're driving to London. That's a destination in London. Do we go down the M1? Do we go down the A1? Do we take lots of side roads to get there? There's lots of advantages and disadvantages of taking both. For me, I'm going to go the direct route down the M1, because that's the quickest way to get there. Some people might go lots of different journeys. As long as you know the destination, how you get there is up for debate. But for me, it's a straight line. The quickest route there to try and get you to the next place.
Fascinating.
But it seems to me you kind of keep yourself excited as a writer, precisely because you don't really plot the whole book, do you? Because I know we talked during One Way Out when, you had all these people in the mosque, and there were a couple of ways that they could come out or people could go in. And I think you were really, it's like Sherlock Holmes says, it was a 3-pipe problem, wasn't it? It's like, how do you end the book? And is that what keeps your momentum as a writer, kind of not quite knowing what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think the ending of One Way Out was really difficult, because I ended up having this situation where we know which mosque it is, and we have got armed police, helicopters, I've got the military, the army, I've got tanks, I've got the entire world, I've got Sky News, Fox, American TV channels. The entire world is looking at one building. And the Home Secretary as well, haven't you?
Oh yeah, because he's in the mix as well.
Politics, everything. So everybody, it's the most secure location in the world, and I have to get Harry to walk straight down the middle of it into that building. And how on earth could I do that? And that took me 3 months of sleepless nights. Now, I knew I'd figure it out. I wish it had taken, I wish it hadn't taken 3 months, because it was a really difficult 3 months. But what happens is the people in the back, I call them the people in the back of the boiler room. Yeah, they're fiddling away trying to figure out how you're going to do this, and they eventually always come up with an answer. But yeah, because I don't know what's going to happen, it keeps me sharp, because Harry will always do something to make my life difficult. And he doesn't care, you see, as a character. He's like, I'm sorry. I remember vividly in One Way Out, there's a scene in a far right stronghold where all I wanted Harry to do was to walk out. All he had to do was walk out. It was really simple. It was going to be a short chapter, no trouble. He wasn't going to get involved with anybody. Just walk out. And he walks out, and I know what he's going to do because I'm writing it, but I can't stop him from doing it. He's going to get into an altercation. And he's going to get into an altercation with 10 people, and it's going to be 10-1, and there's no chance he can win. There's absolutely no chance he can win. So I'm like, keep walking, and he does the one thing I don't want him to do, which is to engage. And then I had to leave him there for a month because I had to figure out how to get him out. And every day he was talking to me saying, I'm still here, Amit. I'm surrounded 10-1. Yeah. You still haven't got me out. Get me out. Get me out. Get me out. And I'm sitting there going, why didn't you just keep walking? But once you've written it, it's done. You can't change it. Yeah, that's what the character would do.
That's
so
the
I
power
have to figure out. Yeah, it's the power of character. I have to figure it out.
And we're running out of time, and a lot of people are saying that they don't want this hour to end.
No, we might run over a little bit, tiny bit.
So okay, so you write 1 million words which don't get published, and you keep going. That is an astonishing belief in yourself, isn't it? And I'm just wondering here, if you looked back at those words that didn't get published, do you think is there anything you could salvage from them, or is it just a journey you had to go on?
No, you can always salvage something from them. You know, more plot than probably actual words. Because when I look back at the first things I ever wrote, it's a bit mortifying. But none of it's wasted. There are never any wasted words. And I think for One Way Out, I salvaged things in One Way Out that I missed, that didn't make it to City of Sinners. There were things in City of Sinners that didn't make it into Girl Zero. Nothing is ever wasted. And there are no wasted words, because those 1 million words that failed, that was ultimately the hard work. You know, those were if you're running a marathon, you don't wake up in the morning and just go and run 26 miles, do you?
No, absolutely.
You do 1 mile, 2 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles. You build up to, and writing is exactly the same. Those 1 million words were training. Okay, that's being in the gym, that's muscle memory, that's discipline, and that's belief. And I think that none of those words are wasted. You know, for me, nothing is ever wasted.
Well, that's brilliant advice. So have you got, what do you still want to achieve as a writer? Because it sounds like you've done a huge amount so far. You've
written a quick read. One of your books has been nominated for World Book Night. That is a massive achievement. And you're nominated for CWA Dagger, and you're working on a TV series. So yeah, where do you go?
I think I want Harry Virdee is in development with the BBC. We're in the final stages of development with that. I want that to come to fruition. For me, I want a brown character on TV, in screen, in people's hearts. I want the books to be read by people, so that we have James Bond, we have Jack Bauer, we have Jason Bourne. We need Harry Virdee. I want people to read and watch Harry Virdee and not see his skin color as the first thing. I want them to see a formidable, fierce character. I want it to open debate and dialogue, and I want brown people to be cool. And I think that there's far too much dialogue out there. There's far too much sensationalist crap out there about all brown people is, you know, terrorists or arranged marriage crap or whatever it is. No, we've got some really, really fierce crime writers out there and stories out there. And for me, it's about changing the narrative, and taking people into a world that is a little bit familiar, but mostly unfamiliar, so that they learn something and they're thrilled and they're entertained.
I do. Well, you do it fantastically. I mean, they are sensational, the books. And even as you're speaking about it, I mean, when you talk about Harry and his father and that whole situation with his young son, and him needing to get over that sort of his own hatred and racism, and being taken back to your own father, standing there in his shop saying, you know, given X number, however long it takes, because they'll start to love me. And it's nearly like the 5-year-old talking back to the grandfather. There's parallels in your own life that are coming through in those books. And literally it makes the hair stand up on your back of your neck as you're speaking. I mean, it's fantastic. You can see that in the comments it's coming through.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic. I can't wait to get to the screen, because I think the books are fantastic, but I think screen does take things to a new level, doesn't it? It brings story out to people who maybe don't pick up books, and I think that's vitally important. So it'll be very, very exciting to see them on screen.
There's a quick question here: is what do your family think about your career as a writer? Because obviously family is really, really important to Harry. Family is clearly very, very important to you. But do they kind of forgive you for having watched Silence of the Lambs now? Is that
yeah? It's funny because I think my parents are still a bit bemused by it. They're just like, oh, you can go and do a little bit of writing now if you've got some time.
Yeah.
They don't quite get it. I think the time that they got it was at the book launch, because for them they were coming to a book launch and they just thought they were going to turn up. There'd be 10, 15 people. You write a book, but then when they were like you, Simon, they walked up and saw. So we had like 350 people in Waterstones, and we had 150 queuing up. And that's the first time they stopped there and said, "Are these all for you? Like you must have written quite a good book," because all they saw was this book, and they had no idea. And I think every book launch since then has got bigger and bolder. And I think now they think that they still don't think I'm a writer. They just think I like to do a little bit of writing.
Right.
My sister finds it amusing because I was terrible at English as a child. She's the A-level grade A English student. I wasn't even allowed in a classroom, okay, because I was not good at English as a child. And it's a misconception, isn't it, that you have to be amazing at English to be able to write. You don't. You have to be good at storytelling.
Yeah.
Storytelling.
So she's always like, I know you got published, but I'll still school you every day of the week when it comes to English. And so, we have a bit of banter about that. I mean, and my wife is my first reader. She's very impatient as a reader. I think a lot of the pace probably comes from her, because when she starts speed reading, I know that I've lost the reader. So because she's very impatient as a reader, so she will come to me and say, this chapter's written really well, but I don't need to know that. Okay, what the hell does that do to this chapter? I know you want to tell that story, but get to the point. So because she's so impatient and she's got no filter, she's absolutely brutal. Okay, and she's no filter. She will just say, "This is shit. Do it again." And at she's thrown chapters at me. She's thrown chapters at me where she's just like, your ego has taken over here. You want to tell this part of a story which has nothing to do with the book, so get rid of it.
I'm loving your wife.
And I think that when you've got someone that fierce, and fierce is absolutely the word. I mean, and it feeds into some of Simon Verdee's character. You really have no room for padding. Okay, my wife will not entertain padding in any way, shape, or form.
Sounds like we should have your wife on one week, I think, and get her to read the slush pile. It would be fantastic.
Oh gosh, yeah, she'd be absolutely brutal today. Bye bye.
Oh.
So my little boy's
brilliant.
He's going to school.
Oh,
First week at school, so he's off.
Ooh,
I think we're going to try and find a way of capturing all these comments and letting you see them afterwards, Amit, because they're fantastic, and I think
they'll be on the page actually if you get a chance.
People are so inspired by all of this, and they think you're really cool as well. So good work on that front.
Good win-win.
I think people found it incredibly inspiring and helpful. And God, we've had an hour. I mean, that has whizzed by, hasn't it?
It's been fantastic. I mean, there's some
brilliant. Thank you so much.
Moments in there. Really, brilliant. Really, really super. So thank you very, very much indeed. So guys, the links are in the comments for you to go out and order those books from your independent retailer.
People are ordering them already, I can see. It's brilliant.
That's brilliant, fantastic. And as I said, I'm in the start of one way out, and I'm loving every page. I mean, it's fantastic, and it really does school you in the how-to of writing. So when you get your copies, go through, look for those things that Amit's highlighted. So what's next, Amit? Just very quickly, what do you? Is there another Harry book coming?
So I'm working. I've got a standalone which is out next summer, which is called The Blood Divide, and it's half set in Bradford and half set in India. So it's a race against time to find out about one character's family history. It's kind of, for me, it's my attempt to try and do the Da Vinci Code, but in Bradford and India. So it's a story about family secrets. It's a story about truth, history, the partition of India, and something was born, something was created in 1947 in the partition of India, something that will affect my character in ways that he doesn't know. So it's it's a pacey 72-hour thriller. So I'm just doing the final edits of that, and then for me it's I'm screenwriting a couple of things which I'm excited about. I'm always got at least 2 or 3 projects going on, and I always remember, people say to me, how do you keep going the way that you do? And I've got this quote on my wall behind me, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, when you're sleeping, your competition are working.
Oh,
So for me,
that's it, isn't it? I mean, you've two small children, you run a shop, you're a pharmacist, you're screenplays, you're writing. Nobody has any excuse not to be able to find
exactly.
time.
Well, that is a
I
terrifying
remember
quote, isn't it?
It's a terrifying quote, but it's true, isn't it? When you're sleeping,
that's absolutely
your
love it.
competition working.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think on that note, that has to be our closing quote, because it is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And you need to get back out there, Amit, because your competition are working while you're on here.
Exactly. I'm back to work now.
Thank you so much for the most amazing hour.
Much.
This will be on YouTube and it's recorded on Facebook. I'll see if I can edit out our problem with the start with our sound. There's always some technical problem, but I'm delighted for everybody to join us. I don't even know who we've got next week, so we'll say thank you very much indeed, and we'll work out who that's going to be. So looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Take care. Thanks, Simon.
Very much.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks,
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.